And now for our quote from Stravinsky and the Mystery House. I am the globgo gabgo lab, the schwabble dabble wabble gabble flibble blabble blab.
Hey there, you're listening to a new episode of the Reading Room Ruffians, your favorite library podcast. Today we have a special guest, author Timothy Huguenin, a West Virginia native. Timothy, thanks so much for being here. We'd love to offer this time for you to shamelessly plug any socials, websites, or other info you want shared here, and then we can get started.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. My website is tghuguenin.com, which I know will be hard to spell. I have a redirect. If you do mountainhorror.com, it'll redirect to my website. So that's easier for like audio kind of applications to tell people, but I'm sure you could probably, I don't know if you have show notes or anything.
It'll be in the show notes, yeah.
Yeah. And then my social media handles, Instagram is tghuguenin. Twitter is the same, but I'm hardly ever on Twitter. And Facebook, you can like search for me and find my author page and stuff like that.
That's great. We had a bunch of questions set up for you. I say a bunch. I think we were leaving book questions for once we got in here because I think some of us were kind of late finishing the book.
Okay.
So we didn't want to share spoilers.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to get started with any book questions before we get in, or?
Okay, I want to know how much we're actually going to talk about the book because I don't think I can
That's
do
fair.
it without giving things away.
Yeah, it's a hard one to talk about without spoiling some things.
We could have like a spoilers section.
Yeah.
Like first half, non-spoilery
Right.
stuff, and then have spoilers for the second half.
I like that.
I mean, this is a short book. Okay, listeners, it's a short book. It's a novella. It's 80 pages, right?
Pause right
Just
now,
go-
read it, take the afternoon,
Exactly.
read it, and then come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd take you no time. It took me like an hour and a half. It was nothing. It was great.
So we can talk about it then. So if
Not
I
yet.
have
We're going to do a
specific
spoiler
questions-
section later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I wanted to know because I was
Cool.
trying to figure out ways to get around saying stuff without,
Yeah.
Imagine
giving it
trying
away.
to pitch this thing when somebody comes by your table at a book fair and you're like, this one's weird, right? What else? am I
Yeah.
supposed to say?
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right.
you want to start with the other questions?
I was going to say, I don't have the thing pulled up, so.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we will go ahead and get started with like our normal questions before we get into the book. We can just save the book questions for the spoiler half. All right. So how did you get into writing? How did you find out that was your calling?
Well, my parents read a lot and kind of, I guess that instituted a love for reading when I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
And a love for books. We would go to the library all the time and get tons of books. And then I don't remember exactly when I connected writing to reading, but there was one time I remember when I was really young that I used to love these kids detective books called Nate the Great. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make my own Nate the Great book. So I took one to a Xerox machine and started copying all the pages. And my mom's like, then I learned about copyright law. And my mom's like, you're not allowed to copy. And I'm like, 6. And I'm like terrified I'm going to get arrested now. But she's like, it'll be okay, but you're just not supposed to do that. Okay. And so I don't know if then I consciously decided, well, I need to make my own book somehow. But that is a memory that I have of trying to figure out how to like make my own version of this thing that I love. And then I have actually, when I was in second grade, I wrote and illustrated a story for my dad called Tom and the One-Eyed Dragon. It's this hilarious like adventure fantasy book. And well, not book. I mean, it's like 5 pages long and the letters are like this big.
The kids equivalent of a book,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. So I the only reason I even know or remember that is because Dad like kept it in his office. He had like a home office, and then when we moved, we moved. I grew up in Davis, and we moved. My parents moved in 2008, so I had already gone off to college. Um, but Dad was going through his office packing, and he found it. So he gave it to me, and I like scanned all the pages. So I have it on PDF. I could send it to you even. It's pretty hilarious.
Yes.
That would be so cool.
Spelling
Yes.
mistakes and my like really funny, like, awkward trying to figure out how the plot works. And so yeah, so as early as second grade, we estimate that was second grade. That based on my various spelling mistakes and Dad's memory. But yeah, so I don't know a real like main turning point where I was like, oh, I need to write, but it's been a part of kind of my life, this idea of like storytelling and coming up with my own stories and everything. And I didn't really pursue it always, so like I remember doing that, and then in middle school I got some hand-me-down old computer that had like DOS and some kind of like proprietary GUI shell that like I don't know, Radio Shack probably invented. I don't even remember the name of it. And it had like a word processor program on it, and so I like kind of wrote this. I started writing a book, right? Then called The Land of the Robots, which was like an obvious ripoff of the Chronicles of Narnia, just with robots. And I got
That'd
like
probably be
five
better, honestly.
pages into that, and then kind of gave up on it. So, and then in high school, I wrote a couple of short stories, but it's kind of like been like herky jerky. But then in college, I was after in college, I actually first went to college with a creative writing major, and then I transferred and changed my major. But then at the end of college, I was like, oh, I always wanted to write a novel. Now I don't have homework anymore. So I guess I can try that. So that's when I first started getting serious about it. But as far as like this idea that I could write my own stories, it was kind of pretty constant throughout a lot of my life. So I don't really know when was like the main deciding factor. Only those few kind of different episodes that kind of all come together.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so what got you into horror specifically?
That's another question that I people ask me all the time, and I don't remember. I know that when I was young, again, like late middle school, I our family is not like a horror family. I didn't grow up watching scary movies.
He's just a weirdo like me.
Yeah. Well, also, I remember being at my cousin's house one time, and she was a few years older than me, and she was going through like a stage of some sort, and was like really and so I was like, Mom, what's this Edgar Allan Poe like guy? And my mom was like, oh, that's just somebody Valerie likes to read. He's really dark, and I'm like, dark? What is it? I don't even know what, like the concept of like dark fiction. I was like, where the lights are all out. I don't know what that even means.
Yeah.
But like my cousin was doing it, so I wanted to do it too. And I remember getting my first book of Edgar Allan Poe stories for Christmas. I don't know if it was that year, or like the year after. And that kind of really was a big deciding factor, I think. I got into Poe. Later on, I started reading outside of like Poe, but I think Poe was kind of an early, more acceptable or something kind of entrance into the genre, because he's literature. So who cares if it's crazy and weird? It's a little easier to like accept, oh yeah, my son wants to read Poe, or I want to read Poe or something, then if you have problems with any other horror writer, you probably won't have problems with Edgar Allan Poe. So that's what I think kind of got me started in that interest. I don't know exactly. I'm still not clear on why I like this stuff. There's a lot of really interesting arguments in favor of like how horror fiction is healthy in certain ways. And I could get into that if I want, but like when I'm really honest, I don't like all the philosophical and all these arguments in favor of the horror genre from like a more, I don't know if scientific's the right word, but um, the reason I like it, I don't know, it's like Apple Jacks, you know, the Apple Jacks commercials from when we were kids,
Yeah.
like why do you like Apple Jacks? It doesn't taste like apples. Like we just do. I don't know. Like
Oh, okay.
that's
Yeah.
what I like. So, but there are, I mean, I think there's a lot of benefits in the horror genre to, you know, horror. I know you didn't ask this, but I don't know if you want me to go on a little rant
No,
here.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Absolutely.
So the horror genre, first of all, you know, literature is supposed. One of the things we love about books and literature is it helps us to reflect on the human experience. And fear and misery is part of the human experience that you have to deal with in the horror genre. So you can look at those aspects in other books that aren't necessarily horror, but that's like the bread and butter of horror, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one aspect. It's like it's part of what who we are human as humans. It helps explore death and grief, helps explore fear, and you know. And then there's another thing that I've been thinking about lately is it seems to me that a lot of horror writers, creators, and fans, we have different approaches to for lack of a better word, entertainment. I don't want to say entertainment because that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that it's not all about entertainment. It's there's a certain kind of person that says and I don't mean to downplay or like to knock this or throw shade, but I was talking to somebody recently that she said, well, I don't watch certain shows because they're too stressful and I have a lot of stress in my life. So that's fine. I totally appreciate that. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the people that are like me are like, we see that there is something to be said for making ourselves sit through something that's uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
and making ourselves like bear witness to that part of the world, and not that, you know, sometimes people ask like, you know, how could you watch um I don't know, for the instance, somebody might say, how could you watch The Exorcist and enjoy like all the all the awful representations of the different, you know, the demonic kind of situation that this girl was going through. Like that doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you enjoy that? I'm like, the point isn't necessarily that I enjoy it all the time. It's that I'm like forcing myself to like meditate on something that isn't comfortable, right? And so
Yeah.
uh, a relation example that's not specific to the horror genre is somebody was saying, I forget, there were some kind of pictures or something going around the news about this like awful horrendous thing that happened to a woman, or I don't remember if it was a woman or like maybe a genocide was happening, because there's always, it seems, a genocide happening these days.
Mm-hmm.
But like somebody was like, "Oh, I'm tired of seeing this in the news. I don't want to see this anymore." And I was like, "No, we have to see that. We have to know that's happening, and we have to, even if we can't find a way to stop it, we can't just like shut our eyes and pretend it
Yeah.
doesn't happen," right? So that is part of what the horror genre is all about. You know, sometimes, you know, some people find a lot of enjoyment in like the blood and guts in kind of like a ironic way, that like, oh, there's a slasher and, you know, it's almost ridiculous because it's so crazy and it's funny. But then there's other stuff that's just like too real for a lot of people. But the horror creator, the horror fan often says like, um, is it like I'm getting off on this? It's like, okay, yeah, this is hard and this is uncomfortable, and that's why we need to explore this.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of, I don't know, my thoughts on it lately. It might change in a few years. I don't know.
I've never really thought about it that way, but that, I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
And we can't as a society, not see the horror.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to say there are definitely times where like I just can't handle like there was a reason that Ted Lasso was huge during the pandemic, right? Because we just needed to shut it all off and, get something kind of positive and feel good, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely in favor of that. Like when I'm stressed out, I will like watch my comfort shows like King of Queens, White Collar Suits, But like
Yeah.
but uh but there's something to be said that like the horror genre isn't just about what makes you feel good. A lot of times it's about what makes you feel bad and and why we need to like kind of see uh be more willing to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations and think about that.
Okay, so I was snooping around on your website and I found a section about books that you've recently read. You talk about them and review them, and we love doing that here. So, do you have any that you have recently read that you would like to share?
Yeah, first of all, I'm terrible at blogging and I don't remember the last time I updated my like that part of my website.
Yeah,
It's
that's
probably
okay.
found out. But I just so let's see the books I've recently read. I forgive me. I have my Goodreads page pulled up here somewhere. I got to look at it. Okay, so yeah, I just like yesterday finished reading a Stephen King book, The Sundog, which was originally in one of his collections. I think it's just kind of a shorter work, but they have it in paperback on its own. Excuse me. And then it was all right.
Yeah.
I am a big Stephen King fan, and I will. I definitely have favorites. That one was just kind of like all right, but before that, I had read my first ever. I'd never read before. Mary Lee Settle book. I found it in actually have it right here. Emily and I, my wife and I were on vacation and we found this little used bookstore in Virginia, and I came across this, The Scapegoat by Mary Lee Settle. Mary Lee Settle is a West Virginia author, and it is signed by her. So that's
Nice.
cool.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, she had already been on my radar just because I'm interested in West Virginia authors, but I had never gotten around to reading anything by her or finding it. And so when I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's this is it. This is one I read. So that was cool. That is about it's set during the West Virginia Mine Wars, and it's she has like 5 books in this series that tells a story of really this like family through different generations, which is kind of cool. I still when it comes to Mine Wars stuff, I still prefer Denise Giardina's Storming Heaven. But that was a cool her interpretation of that through these different voices. Let's see. Also, recently I read Agatha Christie's The Pale Horse.
Oh yeah,
which I like. I like that one. I haven't read a lot of Agatha Christie, but I read that, and then There Were None. But I don't know if anybody here has read The Pale Horse, but it kind of it has some kind of like some witches involved in this question of is there supernatural things going on. So it was kind of interested me.
I've read Agatha Christie, but I haven't read that one.
Yeah.
And there's a really good. I didn't even know about the book until I saw like a mini series that I can't remember what I watched it on. Maybe Amazon Prime. But that kind of my wife and I watched that, and then I was like, oh, I should read the book. So yeah, that's what I did.
Cool.
Very neat. I also discovered a blog post for writer resources. So we typically ask, we typically ask authors that we have on about like their favorite or least favorite part of the writing process and what advice they would give to other writers.
Yeah, I think my least favorite part of the writing process is I think the hardest part is when you're first starting something. it seems like every time I write a story or a book, I'm like, how did I ever do this? And you have to kind of learn it all over again.
Yeah.
And especially because every story is so different. So it's not even that you could just um, I mean, there are definitely things you learn along the way that make things easier, but it still seems like every time it's kind of like, how do I figure out how to do this one? So, um, just that initial first time period when you kind of have an idea of what you want to write, or even enough to start writing, but it just the words come really slowly, and um, it's not even about like I don't know where this is going because I'm the kind of writer where I don't like to have it all fully plotted and outlined out.
Yeah.
But there's a point where maybe I'm out of practice, or maybe it's just the particular story I'm working on where it just is really hard to get going and get some steam rolling, and that's what really frustrates me. And not only that is that like even when I'm kind of on a roll and I'm writing every day and it's easy to write like when I'm in the thick of a book, like I'm shooting for 1,000 words a day. But when I start out,
Yeah.
like I feel good at like a couple hundred. I'm like, oh man, that was rough, you know. So when I'm at that 1,000 a day point where like it comes pretty quickly and easily, if something changes my routine in the week, like like on a Tuesday, like I can't write, it almost like blows the whole week for me, which is really annoying and stupid. But I don't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
know. I even know why that is because you think, well, is it just maybe it's just a discipline problem? I don't really know. There's a lot of psychological stuff that goes into like getting your head in the space for writing that it seems kind of like I don't know. It's almost like I don't know if other writers like this, but you know how like um baseball players are like known for being super superstitious and like wearing the
Mm-hmm.
same socks the whole season. It's kind of like that. It's like, oh man, if this was working, so like if I I don't know what it is that is working for me, so I'm just going to make sure everything is the same every
Yeah.
day
Mhm.
because something's working and I don't know what it is, so I'm going to just do everything that I was doing. I don't know, but yeah, that kind of difficulty in getting a project started, and then the difficulty of like how easily it is for me personally to get derailed from it. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I hate about it.
That's fair.
Oh, so I don't have any solutions for you guys. Sorry.
I mean, that's fair.
I say it a little jokingly, and it's partly true. But the one thing that does help me, especially when I'm starting um, a project, and so a lot of writers have like a word count goal, like I kind of mentioned before, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when I'm working on a book and I've been doing it, I'm kind of like past the hard stage. My goal is usually 1,000 words a day, and having that goal helps me at that stage. But early on, if I say like if I have some kind of like goal that's like that, like I know how hard 1,000 words is going to hit when I just start a book.
Mm-hmm.
And that almost makes me not want to do anything. So it like instead of being a goal that stretches you, it's a goal that like immobilizes you. And so what I do in the beginning now, I've found that if I like put the stakes really, really low. So like, okay, some days I might be like, all right, see if I can hit 200 words, like, or
Mm-hmm.
250, that's almost a page, at least in Microsoft Word, which I don't use while I'm writing. But even some days it'll just be like, just just open up the document and look at it. You don't have to write anything. Don't be scared of that. Just look at it for a little while. And so when I'm having that difficulty when I'm starting out on a project and I'm like scared that I can't produce or just like stressed out about that kind of thing, I'll just like put the stakes super, super low and be like, you know what? It's okay if you don't write anything or don't write a lot. You just need to look at it and think about it or something. So that helps a little bit. And usually that does end up in me writing more than I would have had I had a really hard set goal for that time.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So I think now we're going to get into some of the book questions. I
Now,
thought
these are
this was,
no spoiler questions, right?
I think, yeah, these are, yes.
Okay.
I'll just
She
sit
was
here
like
and
so
answer.
ready.
I just have I think we have like three
That's
or four
fine. That's-
more. Yeah.
take your time.
Okay. So I thought this was very funny. Reading through, Zach has already shared, like, he read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And I just thought it was funny. But was there a specific reason that you chose that book for Mr. V to give to Julian? Because, like, we've never read it, so we wouldn't know. But I didn't know if maybe there was.
Well, yeah, I want to hear
Before you
Zach's
get
thoughts
into
first.
that, okay, so there is one point at the end of the book that sort of gave me vibes of at least the game that they play, that they play in Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. That is the main connection I was thinking of, but I haven't like given it a ton of thought yet, but that felt like the same sort of vibe, I guess.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was intentional, but there's definitely some aspect of the ending of your book and the game they play in it, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah, okay. All right, so it's kind of a yes and no question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of connections between the actual story that I wrote and the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, like a big, it's not as concrete necessarily. It wasn't like I was trying to write a commentary on Philip K. Dick,
Yeah.
But Philip K. Dick is I had like recently read some Philip K. Dick, and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was one of them, and inevitably what I'm consuming tends to make its way into the things that I'm creating sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But Mr. V likes as it had more to do with like the character of Mr. V and what I thought he would like, right? So Mr.
Yeah.
V is the
Mhm.
kind of guy that is into these like metaphysical, philosophical things that like are mind bending and not within the realm of ordinary like mainstream rational kinds of thinkings, right?
Right.
So again, you'd have to read some Philip K. Dick to appreciate this fully. But Philip K. Dick to me was like, if Mr. V was into novels, it would be Philip K. Dick, right? That is his wheelhouse, is that kind of metaphysical, like spiritual. Is it spirituality? Are the drugs affecting just our minds? Is it affecting our realities too? Kinds of situations, right?
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so and I think like Philip K. Dick is, I'm not really like a super into, like I read some sci-fi, but it's just not my main thing. Um, and usually Philip K. Dick is kind of stuck into this sci-fi genre because nobody else knows what to do with him. But he really is kind of his own genre. And so that's how that ended up being a part of Unknowing I Sink, was that like, if Mr. V was going to give a kid a book, what would it be? Right? Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is one of Philip K. Dick's most accessible stories, as crazy as that is.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if I were Mr. V and I wanted to like get a high school kid interested into these kind of like more I don't even know what the word for it is, but these like different ways of thinking and understanding the world and understanding even fiction, um, then I would maybe start with Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Okay.
Also, it's worth noting at the time, I hadn't read a whole lot at that point. I had read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and The Man in the High Castle. Since then, I've read quite a bit more. My wife got me like one of those Library of America box sets. Phil K. Dick, like um, his main kind of novels, not his entire works, but and yeah, it just gets even weirder. So definitely, I think Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was the right choice for that. And
Yeah.
it was the one that most likely other people have heard of before too, even just as in terms
Mhm.
of connecting with the reader. Um, that was
Cool.
kind of my thought process behind that.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I do want to read The Man in the High Castle. It does look very good. I've heard only good things about it. So
and it's worth noting, like I said, how Do Angels Dream of Electric Sheep has a lot to do with also these themes that Philip K. Dick doubles down on in other books, where it's like, what is what is a human? Is it because I almost just want to say Blade Runner to shorten the mouthful of
there you
that.
go. In Blade Runner,
But
basically the same
the thing is, they're different stories, right? So, but that's a whole other discussion about film adaptations and stuff. But Duendra's Dream of Electric Sheep, these characters are, using what seems to be some kind of like, I'm going to assume drugs because there's drugs in all of his novels, but like they change their consciousness and their moods very easily. And this idea also of is what is personality and consciousness? Can a robot have that? Those kinds of themes, they fit in really well with Mr. V's, like what's going on there with him plugged into those computers and stuff like that, and him like exploring what it means to be human and what it means to be something beyond a human. That's Philip K. Dick stuff right there. I hadn't even read that much PKD, which I learned because I wondered, after a while, like, what do fans? They can't just go around like saying, I'm a fan of Dick all the time, right? So it turns out the I don't know the common way of,
I don't know. I feel like they should.
they refer to it for shorthand as PKD, which I think I even Googled, like, what do you say, right? So PKD is like the short version of
instead of his full name, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Amazing.
I like that. PKD.
Yeah.
Not polycystic kidney disease, though. Just FYI. Make sure you're not Googling that one.
But yeah, so yeah, I think it fit well into that story, and even maybe for a PKD fan, it fits even more than even I expected after reading more of his work. How the stuff that he was interested in was very along the lines of the stuff Mr. V is interested in.
Pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So how did you come up with the Unknowing, I think? Like, it was just, I like to ask people how their brains work whenever they come up with stuff like this, because I also, I do have a weird brain that comes up with really weird stuff, but I don't know if you have like your own system for it, or if you just encounter things sometimes and you're like, oh, well, what if? I don't,
yeah, sometimes I wish you could turn it off. Like, sometimes, man, like my brain just feeds me weird stuff. I don't know. I think for that one in particular, so there was this kind of up and coming in the small press indie scene, this publisher and magazine, Gehenna and Hinnom Publishers. They had a magazine called Hinnom Magazine. And it was like it was like really gaining some traction in like the small press horror indie scene. And I had sent them a story that I really didn't think anybody would want. And this guy thought it was great. Honestly, he thought it was better than I thought it was. And which is, it's great. So he took that one, and then he published another one of my stories. And so like we had a really good relationship, but we would email and chat about other stuff and things going on with his press. And so I kind of had this idea of like, what is this editor like? And wanting to really further, like I wanted to really keep this relationship with his editor really strong. And so I knew there were certain stories that would be like, this is what this guy likes. And so actually Unknowing, I think, was going to be a short story that I was writing for him. He hadn't asked me for it, but we kind of had this like, he was like, dude, just send me something, I'll probably publish it kind of thing, which is not a common, especially when you're starting out as an author. It was really nice to have that relationship. So I wanted to kind of pay tribute to that and be like, okay, like I'm, not just like send him something left over that nobody else wanted. Like I wanted to like nurture that. And so I started, and I knew we liked the weird kind of the other stuff that he had liked before had like this body horror element to it. Like the first story
Mm.
that he read that he published was about this kid who every spring he grows a mouth on his arm that he has to cover up with long sleeves, but then one year it starts talking to him, and so he can't really cover that up anymore. And then like they also published a story about this woman whose house starts growing teeth, and so
Oof.
so that was like I knew that was like the kind of the stuff they liked, and so I started writing the story, and I don't remember what came first or how it all was put together. I think the first thing that I got was this image of Mr. V in the library, just this kind of big amorphous fleshy situation. And I think I knew from the beginning that he. Oh, I was about to get to a spoilery kind of thing. So I think there were certain parts about the ending that I knew from the beginning, which
Mhm.
especially with shorter stories is usually a lot of times I will start working knowing a little bit about the ending, even if it changes. With longer stuff, that's not so. But so it was originally intended to be a short story. It was originally intended to be like 3,000 to 5,000 words, and I get to like the 5,000 word mark, and I'm like, dude, this thing is like just starting. So I'm like, oh well, this guy is doing more than just the magazine. He might even want to publish the novella. So I just kept trucking with it. And then by the time I had some other stuff going on in my life, and I stopped. My writing output really went down for a while, and uh, and I had some issues with uh, depression and stuff, which ended up making their way into the book. But I had to sort all that out before I came back and finished it. By the time I did that, as so often happens, unfortunately, with small indie horror presses and magazines, the whole thing just kind of collapsed and like was no more by the time I'd finished this book.
Mm.
So I had this book that was like almost custom written for this one editor. That was so weird. Weird for me. Now there's like weird out there that's beyond, but like in terms of what I was getting into, it was one of the more weirder things that I had written. And then I'm like, what do I do with this? So I did end up finding a good place for it. There's a whole story with that, but I don't want to keep going on that if you have more questions. So
Okay. So Zach, you might have to help me with the pronunciation of this, but
Okay, no,
I
okay.
promised I would ask you this. There is this video called, is it Glub Go Gub Glab?
It's Globgo Gabgalab.
Have you seen that?
the only reason I'd seen it is because I looked at these questions before we started this morning. And
Okay,
that video is such a delight, but also like it's almost disappointing because I'm like, somebody else out there is going to think that I wrote this book because of that video, and it's
It was
is
just
it good or
like
bad? I
Zach
don't know.
mentioned it. Zach mentioned it last night. He's like, it reminds me of this. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then
The
I
Globgo
made
Gab.
Mallory watch it because she had never seen it. And I was like, oh, I'll ask. I'll ask if he based it on it.
I never
Yeah,
heard
so
that. What is the story on that video?
Okay, so that video is from a really, really bad movie that's animated, right? And there's a few like weird songs and stuff in there like that, but the Globgo Gabgalab got super popular. I don't know.
It's so
It's
catchy.
like 5 or 6 years ago. And they took that song and people would like remix it and stuff like that or reinterpret it. But anyway, yeah, it's just from some like weird little animated thing. I think I own the
He
video now. I
looks-
bought it just
I
to
mean,
see
he looks like a
the
human
context.
slug, honestly.
Kinda,
Yeah, he looks like a human slug,
He's
and
like
he loves
Jabba
books.
the Hutt, but more human, but which is worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody, if you haven't seen the Globgo Gabgalab, just Google it. I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It's fantastic. You need to listen to it. Clearly nothing to do with this book. But as soon as I heard the
No.
description of Mr. V the first time,
Yeah,
and the fact
like
that he
And
was
he's
fleshy
surrounded by
pale
books.
in
in the
the
books,
library.
and he's surrounded by books, I was like, this dude clearly loves the Glad
Yeah.
vocabulary.
I've never heard of it, never seen it until this morning. So
I never had
thanks for
either.
that.
Yeah. He is the yeast of thought and mind, as they say.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That sounds like something Mr. V would say too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's really
He's
weird, the
fine.
similarities
Why do you think
there.
that?
Yeah, I hadn't finished the book at that point, but that was like the first thing I thought of as soon as I read that. I was just like, this sounds like, and in the library, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
This is just a me thing.
That's
I don't know. I used to listen to that on repeat.
This is why when people get real upset about like oh this person stole my idea, I'm like, ideas just aren't that unique sometimes, you know. Like,
Mm-mm.
Exactly.
as crazy
Yeah.
as you think yours is, somebody else might be thinking something really similar, and it's not necessarily plagiarism, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all our actual like non-book
That was
questions.
like our prepped questions.
So if you want to ask yours now,
I've almost
She's
forgot
been-
them. I was so excited, and now I've almost forgot. It's okay. I thought Julian was well written. I mean, he was a very believable young kid. But I don't know if any of the rest of you did this. I spent the entire book trying to figure out what Mr. V was.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like,
I spent the entire book trying to figure it out too.
okay.
I
mean,
legit just accepted that he was weird and he probably had some like weird alien thing
Yeah.
or tumor or something, like sentient tumor in
Yeah.
his stomach that
Yeah.
ate things.
well, I mean,
Wait,
the
so are we in
reference
the
to
spoiler section now or not?
probably.
Yeah, I'm gonna
probably.
say
Yeah,
yes.
spoiler
Should we make like a flashing
Spoiler section.
screen, like spoiler.
Yeah.
Spoilers, yeah.
Spoilers here.
I mean, I went from like he's a sick old man with some kind of alien in him. I went like that. Then I think, well, maybe he is an alien. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe he's immortal because he found the that water
Yeah.
from Ponce de Leon, the eternal youth stuff. And I was like, but he didn't look very young. So I mean, I was like the entire book, I was trying
Yeah.
to figure out what,
Yeah.
and I really expected at some point to have like this mouth with all these like sharp teeth
Yeah.
in his belly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was just, I don't know. I was surprised.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what was with the statues?
Okay, so what? There's one question in there.
There wasn't a question there. There's just a bunch of stuff.
So okay,
I mean, did you have what you said you didn't have? You were trying to figure out what he was too. So
yeah, like I said
Did-
before, I don't really pre-plot or outline my books.
Mhm.
So even though I might have an image I'm going towards, or some, I do know some things before I start writing, but like
Uh-huh.
I let it be what it needs to be. So yes, I wasn't sure. I really didn't have all the answers on Mr. V, even when I knew more than we had gotten to in the story. So what I was going to say earlier about that is that when I started with the story, I think I had this image of him in the library on that table, and I think I also knew that somehow he was absorbing things through his stomach in kind of like an osmosis-y kind of situation. And so that was pretty much all I had in terms of who is this Mr. V guy at the beginning, if I even had it that well like clarified in my head. As I wrote, I'm getting more to know what is this character of Mr. V, what does he value, what is he looking for, why is he the way he is. Obviously he's really interested into like the meanings of life. Or I just saw Heretic last night, by the way. I don't know if you guys have seen it, if you're into horror movies, and it's got Hugh Grant in it. Hugh Grant was an inspired choice for this guy because he's so good at being like disarming. And so
Oh, no, I've been wanting to watch this,
he's-
but yeah.
he's the villain. I mean, that's obvious in the trailer, but he's just so good at, in such a weird and stressful, uncomfortable situation for these girls, still making them question whether or not like their fears are valid, right? So it stretches out the time before they like try to get out of there and stuff. But Hugh Grant in this, or the character in this movie, it has this obsession with the one true religion, right? So that is very similar to what Mr. V, he wants to know what is out there, what is like the meaning of the cosmos. How do you stretch what a human is to the next step in evolution? Can you speed that up? Right. So those are all things that Mr. V is interested in. That's the as I went, and in fact, I cut down. Um, he kind of has these like discourses that he's like almost trying to indoctrinate Julian with. There was a lot more of that in the original draft that I had to cut out because I'm like, nobody's going to sit through this crap, like, don't even know what Julian is except for he's getting paid. So, um, so yeah, sorry. Were you going to say something, Mallory? I saw your Zoom thingy light up. I don't know if you're.
Oh, no, I was just chuckling.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out now what the question was that you asked. Um, yeah, so the you did ask what's the deal with the statues. Okay.
Yeah.
The deal with the statues was one of those things that kind of comes about organically while you're writing. The kind of the mysteries. I don't know if you read Stephen King has written this, I think in multiple places, but especially in his memoir on writing, how he thinks of himself as like an archaeologist that like digs into a story and like kind of finds new pieces of it as it unearths. And so that's kind of how the statues came about. What is the deal with them? I'm not 100% sure, but the way it works in my mind is that there's some kind of extraterrestrial or interdimensional connection there. So these statues, which appear as statues in Julian, I don't know if I wasn't clear enough on this. I was talking about this to a friend of mine who read the book, and she didn't think that I presented this clearly enough that there seem to be multiple statues and they don't seem to always be in the same place at the same time or the same place every time. Right. And I don't know if I was, if I presented that well enough, but in the end, there's a suggestion that these statues might in fact be living beings that are somehow connected to all this, and maybe a living beings that Mr. V somehow ended up contacting through his various pursuits in the crazy, weird stretches of the dark web and stuff. Now, I will say that in this genre of weird fiction, there is a more acceptance of unresolved issues and endings than I think a lot of mainstream fiction and even mainstream horror is. There's like a whole genre of like weird horror, right? And there's a lot of like, if you read anything by some of the writers that had been influencing me at the time, Thomas Ligotti is one of them, and then Robert Aikman especially. Robert Aikman, if you read any Robert Aikman stories, he has this amazing ability to write a story that totally creeps you out, and at the end of the story, you're like, I have no idea what happened there. It's almost like looking down into the ocean, and you see these like shadowy shapes, and you're like, I can almost see what's going on, but I'm not sure. But all I know is I don't want to dive in there, right? So that's a Robert Aikman story, so that influence kind of was guiding me a little bit. And Thomas Ligotti isn't quite as vague, and I don't know if vague's the right word, but for lack of a better term, he's a little more easy to be like, okay, I can clearly see everything's laid out at the end, what happened, but there's still this like mystery of like, okay, I can see what happened, but I still don't understand what all is at work here. All right. So Thomas Ligotti is a lot like that. And he goes into like very existential kinds of philosophical kinds of stories. And so those two writers have been an influence on me, especially at the time. And so I guess the short way of coming all around, the short story is there's a lot of stuff left open to interpretation in this book. But not nearly as much as left open to interpretation as like a Robert Aikman story. So
yeah, I had just assumed that they were like past people that he had consumed.
Oh, I didn't even come up with that one.
That was what I had gone with, because it kind of just seemed like suddenly at the end they were all there, and I was like, oh well, you know.
So like he consumed them, but then they like rebirthed somehow, maybe, or Or
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of thing. We don't know what happens after he eats things.
You
after
really,
all.
you don't. And
Right.
there's
This
a
is
lot
true.
more
He
you
never
could do with
moves.
this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot more.
Yeah, the hypothesizing is often a lot more interesting than, I guess. Okay,
I think
no
it ended too
offense,
quick.
but what the author actually means or said or thinks about the world, a lot of times the hypotheses are better than whatever that is. So if you just leave it vague,
right.
right,
Yeah,
like
there
you're
has
doing
to
now,
be enough that
then we
it
can
feels like an
hypothesize
ending,
better.
But I
Yeah.
kind of, so I like, and when I was younger, I didn't appreciate any kind of like unresolved kinds of stories, right? And I'm not even saying this story has a clear resolution, but there's a lot that's left open to imagination,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, yeah,
and
it does end.
but I like to, when I was there's this kind of like idea in especially I think in kind of like uh, academic literary circles and like postmodern kind of influenced academics that the entire meaning is up to the reader, and I don't believe that, because
Mhm.
listen, man, if I'm writing something down, like I mean something, and even if I don't mean something, I have the say on that because I'm the author. But
Mhm.
if you have, I believe that the reader does. I think it's legitimate to. I don't think it's legitimate to say that the entirety of the meaning is up to, or even the majority of the meaning is up to the artist, or I mean, it's not the artist, but the reader. I think that's kind of insulting to writers, and it's insulting even to readers. But I do think that if the writer chooses, he can say like, I want you to be involved in the creation of this, or I want you to think about this when you leave here and let you come up with your own conclusions. And I do think it's legitimate for you to say as a reader, well, either I don't know what the writer meant or I do know what the writer meant, but I can find an application of this and connect it to something else in my life that's not related to what the writer meant. But to say that's
Mhm.
what the story's meaning is inherently within the realm of the reader's judgment, I don't think that's I just don't subscribe to that opinion. Um, but I like to, but I do like the idea of like, whoa, these things are something that like the writer didn't explain. I, I like the idea of somebody wondering about that, like going to sleep at night and being like, I wonder what that was all about, you know?
Mhm.
And I do the same thing even with my own stories. Like I said, like there's stuff that with Unknowing I Think, I'd be like, is this where I was going with this? Or is this just like, I wonder how this could have played out later on. It almost brings in the reader as a storyteller in the end, because you can continue certain aspects of it on your own.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
it's
seems to
fun.
work really well with certain sorts of stories. Like horror is a great genre for
Yeah.
it. There's sometimes, but in other genres, it might not be the case. Like I know that some of us are not happy when endings are somewhat ambiguous in their fantasy stories, for example, or any of the books I pick.
Yeah.
For stuff
It's not the endings per se, it's the entire book.
I don't know. I think you
I
just
don't
didn't like
books
Piranesi
when
because
they're
of the ending.
pointless. When there's no point to a book being wrote, I don't like it.
There is a point.
There's
It's
not
in
a
the journey.
point. There's not a point. There's not.
Anyway, sorry.
And somebody got bored and just threw some words on a page. That's all it is. No point.
You were saying something, Mallory, or Carla?
I don't think I was. I don't know.
I think I kind of like it when there is like a slightly vagueness about it because it gives you a chance to talk
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gives me a
and to
chance to decide
theorize and
what
stuff like
actually
that.
happened.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
isn't that what, like, nobody, the things that we talk about, like after, let's take Lost, for instance, all of the different weird stuff about that island that wasn't fully wrapped up, that's the stuff that we go like after every episode or after we've
Mhm.
seen the show, we're like, man, I wonder what that was all about, right? Like
Yeah.
people criticize Lost, I think unfairly in a lot of ways, but I'm a big fan of Lost, if you couldn't tell. But people criticize it for the very reasons that people probably loved it, like
Yeah.
Mhm.
they couldn't figure out what was going on with those polar bears. And I want to point out, if you actually, this is hard to get watching it as it aired, because you had such a gap between the episodes and the seasons. But if you watch Lost straight through a few times, you start to realize how actually many crazy different directions they had gone, and how many of those different directions they did start tying up in the last season. It's really remarkable how much they did resolve in that show that I don't even believe that they could have,
Yeah.
But yeah. But that ending, man, like the ending of Lost, there's a lot of disagreement about what that even meant. And
Yep.
some people it just made them mad. I don't think it made me mad, but I also think a lot of people that are mad about the ending, I think they didn't even get it, right? Like there's some clear stuff that it's clear when you like really keep track with everything that's going on. For instance, if you come at me and say like, "Oh, I hated Lost because the ending said that they were just all dead the whole time," I'm like, you clearly weren't paying attention. There's a certain point where they are dead, but it's not the entire show. It's not even most of the show, right? So, like I think I like stuff that rewards like a careful attention to details, those stories. But then I also like when there's still that kind of like stuff to discuss, like you said.
Well, as someone who's never seen Lost,
No spoilers.
that was a wild conversation.
I've watched
Apparently,
part of
there's people who have like not recut, but like there's like order lists so that you can actually watch Lost in chronological order. Not sure if you've ever done that, but apparently it's very good to do it that way.
I'm not sure I would want it to be presented to me that way.
Well, I mean, if you've already seen
You
it,
wanna
it might be an
watch
interesting way to go do it. I wouldn't say do that the first
I've never
time.
seen the first episode. I've never watched it, so
I watched.
I've watched some of
It's
Lost. And it's
interesting.
interesting.
But Lost changed television. I mean, it's even if you don't like
really
it,
did.
it is like undeniably like a milestone
I don't
in
watch
public,
TV.
like I don't know what you call it, cable or whatever we were all on at the time, satellite. It's like a milestone in television, and it was ahead of its time in so many ways, and it changed the production. I mean, like it set a standard for production quality and writing quality that I don't think that was a standard before it came to pass.
Yeah.
There weren't very many shows that would have that. I mean, like you had. I'm trying to think what had came out before Lost. No, I mean it was just kind of a phenomenon at the time.
Yeah.
It really was. Changed the game.
Yep.
I just don't watch TV or movies really. So
It was a crazy show. I don't think I watched the last season though. I think that was whenever. I don't know. I don't remember what year it came out, like that final season. But for whatever reason, I didn't watch it. And then everybody was so mad that I knew that I was like, okay, I guess it's fine that I didn't watch it. Now I kind of want to.
I didn't even know people were mad about it. Like
Yeah.
I live under a rock.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was a huge deal back
It
in the
really
day.
was. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was big of a deal as Game of Thrones ending, but
right.
Oh, see, that
That
one
was-
I actually heard about. So
that was Garbo trash.
which I also have not watched.
I didn't watch that either or read it.
I read it.
Well, it's not over yet.
Well,
If you read it,
I read up to what's out.
it's book 5, and then it's like it's never gonna end. So anyway, get back on topic.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
In the book, Mr. V talks about all the disappearances in that area.
Oh yeah.
Is he
Sorry.
eating all these people? Is there more people around that are like him that are also eating people? Is there like an invasion? Like,
All right,
Ooh.
so here's there are some stories that are out, and then some that still haven't been published, and books I've written and stuff like that. So this community, this like Augustus Valley / High Point area, is like a fictional part of West Virginia that I invented, right? Kind of like
Yeah.
yeah.
my version of Castle Rock or Derry or something, And
hmm
and I like to kind of put little Easter eggs in some of these stories for different stories. But
Mhm.
when you realize and I'm not saying that I'm necessarily going to hold myself to be like 100% consistent to every single thing I've written that's set in this area. But if you do want to have like some kind of like your own little universe, I wanted to point out the fact that there are these other things that I've written in this. It's supposed to be a small town in West Virginia, and if people die a lot in a small town in West Virginia, somebody's going to notice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, being a horror writer, I write stories where people die and or disappeared or unexplainable things happen to them. So that was my way of kind of being like pointing out that kind of in like weirdness of the areas. Like, hey, how come no like this guy is like actually paying attention? It's like, have you ever noticed like how all the weird stuff that happens here? Like um and it seems like a lot of the characters in my stories are oblivious to that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the main ones is that actually what like the third novel that I've written that hasn't been published yet is set in Augustus Valley, and it involves like um, a lot of kind of it's about this like traveling hypnotist guy that kind of takes over the town, and there are people that um man, it's been so long since I've even like I, seriously, like some of the stuff I've written, I forget most of it. I was at a book club in Clarksburg where they did my book Little One for like their book club, and they had me come in and talk about it, and they're saying stuff I'm like, oh man, I forgot about that. Like so yeah. So this there's weird stuff that happens in Augustus Valley. A lot of my stories take place there in that area. People end up dying or disappearing mysteriously. So that was just kind of him like pointing out the obvious to this kid who doesn't seem to realize, like nobody in this town, you know, in my stories, they don't talk about the other things that happen. It's kind of weird, but then also kind of interesting. Like, well, what if that was something that, like pointing out that these things are all taking place in this town, but also pointing out that people don't seem to acknowledge it is kind of an interesting thing in and of itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just like opening the door to
Right.
this.
So in my head, again, depending on how much ownership of the story you want to take, I guess you're free to imagine whatever alternate realities of the story you want to. But I don't consider like there being a bunch of other Mr. V like people in this
Okay.
area. So he's kind of his own thing in my head. But again, how much you're free to imagine whatever stories you want beyond this.
That was a good question, though.
Yeah.
I didn't
It's
even
the
consider
statues.
Yeah, my other question wasn't nearly as philosophical, I guess. My other one was like, why eggs?
Yeah, it felt like I don't know. It felt like there was some sort of like weird.
I mean, I
ovum
love eggs.
pregnancy
Don't get me
symbols.
wrong; they're like
The
my
eggs at first.
they're my safe food.
Yeah.
But like,
Eggs are fantastic.
I eat a
yeah.
lot.
I don't know
eggs.
that I could eat a dozen eggs every day.
I buy those, those boxes of 60 you can get from Walmart.
I get those. That's what I buy.
Yeah.
I love
I
eggs.
think eggs were just like, I think it was just easier to. Any high school kid can cook hand scrambled eggs. They're kind of weird and gross. They have like this,
Mhm.
they're, they like you said, there's like it's material that a living being is formed out of.
Yeah, I hate what he called them. Like what did he say?
Something about embryos.
Embryotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
I was like, that's gross.
I think I
don't
had
it
like a
phrased that
gut
way.
instinct that it was a good choice on like the gross out weirdness factor.
Yeah.
Even though I love eggs, but if you stop and think about it,
Yeah.
you're like, eh.
Or just like,
It's like-
imagining the way it would look
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
his stomach.
Right.
You get some like sort of pseudo runny scrambled eggs just like
Right.
laying there in a pot.
That's what. Yeah, that's
just
what
kinda
I was
gross.
picturing.
That
That's
he's
what made it
consuming-
so.
He's not even consuming for taste or pleasure, right? He's just
Yeah.
needs the nutrients. So like eggs are just like easy protein. But if you don't season eggs, they're not that great, right? So
Mhm.
like,
No.
I think that was part of it too. It was just like a very good. It just worked in so many ways in terms of like being having more of a weird and strange, icky kind of imagery
Yeah.
and tactile kind of presence, but also the embryonic kind of symbolism and just the mechanics of it's easy to cook, easy to consume. You can make good eggs, but it doesn't It's not necessarily like the most complex flavor profile. It's just kind of utilitarian.
I get that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep, no, that makes sense.
I appreciate his sister being like, I'm just going till Long gets old.
Yeah.
I was like,
That
that's a little sister for
Yeah.
you.
But to be fair,
Yeah.
he did cover it in ketchup, so
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, which
not
is, I
even-
think is disgusting.
Yeah, not even that. I think he just made
He made
all
so
dozen
many.
He also made a
eggs.
dozen
He was
eggs
like,
for her.
What are you
Drowned
doing?
it in
Like-
ketchup, which is so gross.
he was clearly, I don't know, infectorized or something by
Yeah.
Mr. V at that point.
I
You know,
the
it got into his brain.
the statues for me were kind of a misdirect. I really expected like I expected something with Mr. V to happen, but I also thought that the terracotta statues were going to be like way more nefarious and like a problem. And especially whenever he was going to drink the water,
I really
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like they
I-
was talking to him, and that was not Mr. V.
I did too. And I was like, oh my God, no. Because he's
Stick your tongue in it. I was hoping he would, man. I was like, drink it.
Yeah, the intrusive thoughts really were about to win. And then he came over the intercom and was like, what are you doing? I was like, "Ah."
That was pretty funny, yeah.
That one got me.
They would have won with me. I've been like, okay.
All right.
Just a
Twist
little
my
taste.
arm. Yeah, that
Never hurt
was
anybody.
that was such a weird part for me, but it was one of those things. I don't know. It made me laugh after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in it, I was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?"
I would have stuck my finger in it and went,
Oh my gosh.
gross.
I think me as a high schooler, I don't think I would have even needed him. I think I would have just like, I wonder what that tastes like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would have done it.
That's
I mean, as an adult, I still put weird things in my mouth all the time. I'm just like, oh, what's that?
Just
No.
eat that. Yeah.
no.
Gross.
I can't help it, man. The intrusive thoughts.
It's like you can't say anything because of the
Yeah,
cave water
I really
incident.
like how those statues turned out, and I like that they're. Yeah, I don't see them as a misdirect so much as you. It makes you wonder, because I think that what I wanted to convey, at least after going back over it and everything, was that like they were involved in the background in a greater way, but you
Mhm.
don't really know what. And
Yeah.
and Julian could never know. Like
Yeah.
Julian could never see past his own fate, and so I wanted to like have that sense of like, oh man, there's something bigger going on here that
Mhm.
Julian isn't aware of and we're not aware of, and
Yeah.
we wonder what that is.
Yeah, there's clearly something going on because they did disappear. They did move around and
Right.
stuff like
So,
that.
so really, the real evil, or if it's evil, right? Depending on what you want to define as evil in the story, there's something greater going on. Mr. V isn't the cause of all this in a way, like there's
Yeah.
something even greater than Mr. V that is has intruded into our world or universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some sort of like eldritch thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, has happened, and he's just sort of a conduit, maybe. I don't know.
Mhm.
Oh, actually, so regarding the ending, since it was real weird. I guess. I mean, I don't know what you guys thought, and like maybe you can clarify a little bit. I was not convinced that it actually happened because of all this. He was like starting to get weird stuff happening in his mind, right?
Mhm.
Julian was. So it felt to me more like it was Mr. V sort of messing with his mind. I still think he got schlorped. Don't get me wrong. Right in that belly.
Perfect word for
I'm
it.
not entirely. That is what happened. Yes, it's schlorping.
Oh my God.
100%. Anyway, that he like climbed up, like actually climbed up his belly and like got so high up into space that he couldn't breathe. This is clearly like I don't think that was like legit, but I felt like it was something. I don't know, sort of controlling his mind in a way. But that's the part that I was thinking about for Andrew's Dream of Electric Sheep. They have that game in there where they constantly like they're like forced to walk up the hill, right?
Oh, right.
And stuff is being thrown
yeah.
at them, and it's like it's a struggle for them, but they do it because of like empathy or whatever,
Right.
to feel something. And it felt like a more horrific version of that, just because he was like,
even in that, don't you get the sense that PKD is like, okay, I told you, and we all think that this is like a kind of like virtual reality for most of the thing, but there's a sense in which he kind of starts to leave open the possibility that maybe it wasn't all as synthetic as we thought it was.
yeah, that was very ambiguous there,
and
especially
that's in a lot of his books, right? Where it's like, oh, suddenly the thing that we thought was all imaginary is affecting us in ways that it shouldn't if it's all imaginary. And that is kind of, I think I wanted to kind of walk that line a little bit with
it's like
insanity and with what's going on there.
It's almost like real adjacent, It's leaking in, sort of. I don't know. But yeah, there was that part was just wild. It was a good visual again, though.
Yeah.
Also, like the describing Julian like in the smells and his dry heaving. Oh, that kind of grossed me out. Not gonna lie.
Oof.
I was having
a little bit difficulty. I paused it there for a second. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and then he carried the sponge in his mouth.
Yeah, that was disgusting.
Okay, yeah, that part.
I screamed.
That was uncalled
My family
for.
was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I don't want to talk about it."
Until you guys reminded me that I forgot the whole reason he's climbing is because he's like giving this guy a sponge bath. That's
exactly.
Oh, man.
I hated that he had that bucket and it was full of gross water and he didn't go get clean water. Like, that drove me crazy. You're not cleaning him anymore. You just smear it.
No, it didn't matter at that point. He was already too deep in.
Yeah.
He was in the thrall.
If I want to be eaten, I want to be eaten by something clean.
Ugh.
If you are being slurped, it's not going to be clean. I'm just going to say, if you're being slurped, it's not going to be clean. It's a thing.
I have standards on being slurped.
Oh my gosh.
I guess the question on it, when it really comes down to it, is how much would he have to pay you to clean him with a sponge, right? Because Julian's getting paid a lot of money.
He paid really well.
Yeah, really well. I mean, honestly, I just would not put this sponge in my mouth. That was a non-starter for me. No, thank you. Yeah.
And I wouldn't climb up. I'd be like, nah, I got this, bro. Watch this. And go get like a broom handle.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
You just gear up fully.
What is like windshield washer?
Gloves.
Don't you have like a hose in here or something?
I'd be like, sir, we got to figure this out better because I don't do physical touch.
No.
No, I don't know. I think I could have done it for just like, a couple $100. I clean him in.
I think there's a point where there's no amount of money.
Couple $100.
You didn't give it a switch back?
No.
It's like, do I know about the Schlorp?
I think I'd have been creeped out to begin with.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
If I know about the slurping, I'm going to charge more. But if I don't.
Yes! I don't care to still do it, but you got to pay more.
You're telling me that after all those times those eggs disappeared, Julian didn't know about the slurping? I mean, come on.
Yeah, this is true.
Dude, as soon as I heard about those eggs disappearing, I was like, oh, he's getting 8.
Like in a sigh, and I was like, man, this kid. Like I thought that was an interesting kind of.
I get the feeling this kid is dumb, though.
Well, most people in horror stories are, in my opinion. Which I can't. But I thought it was less annoying because he was trying really hard not to be a bad person.
Yeah,
which is how he talked himself out of it, which normally people like see something blatantly ridiculous and they're like, man, that's not real. So like in that sense, I liked that because I was expecting at every turn him to just say like, no, that didn't happen. But like he knew something was happening, but he was trying really hard not to be rude about it.
He's just a sick old man.
Yeah, like
right. You can't hate a
you
sick
sweet
old man.
little baby.
He was a sick old man.
Yeah.
You slurped people.
Well, that's a good point, though. One of the hardest things about the horror genre is trying to solve this problem. Why don't they just leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, to go back to after this podcast, nobody's gonna read my book. They're gonna go out and read a bunch of PKD, and they're gonna see Heretic because they keep talking about it. One of the greatest parts of Heretic is how there's this one girl who's I don't know if you've seen the trailers anyway, even. Basically, the premise is there's these 2 female LDS missionaries that come to a guy's house, and they want to, talk to him about the gospel of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, from the Latter-day Saints perspective, right? And so this girl is so like society's drilled into her this politeness and don't offend people, that even when it's patently obvious that this guy, I mean, like, you can hear in her voice, she's so terrified. And at this point in the movie, the kind of most of the cards are on the table that this dude's not a good dude. And she's still trying to say, as they try to get out, thank you, you've been such a gracious host, but I think we're going to leave now, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think part of what people don't realize is how much of a human trait that is. That like, you know what? Maybe I wouldn't just leave. But you do have, as a writer, you have to bring in those pressures of and make that known. Like, why wouldn't a person leave the situation that's clearly like not good, right? And so, yes, there's in humanity this kind of inertia aspect where to have us like commit to like bouncing out of here is actually probably harder than we think it is. But also, as a writer, you gotta bring those pressures to the forefront and make them clear. And so that was something like, how do I make Julian keep going along with this? One of it is that sense of like, hey, I can't just like, he never has proof that this guy is as weird and awful as he might suspect.
Yeah.
And he also, he wants money. He's got to impress that girl. And the only way that was with a car, in his logic, right? And so those are kind of like the factors that I kind of had in place to try to keep him going as far as he went. And then as you get further into the story, there is kind of this sense of, I don't know if transformation is the right word, but there's something going on with him that is not just the schlorping, right? And that's another part that it's a little ambiguous, like what is going on with Julian. And I don't have maybe clear response to that, other than there is a lot of this sense, this kind of pressure and this confusion and this like physical manifestation of this confusion and like the hurt and pain he's feeling. That was very much me interacting with some recent struggles of my own, of like these episodes of depression and stuff where you don't even know what's bothering you. You're just like in such a state of like pain and psychological kind of like fog that you can't even articulate like your own thoughts at a certain point, right? You're just like in a bad place. And that's kind of what Julian's going through. Now, that is kind of an allegorical kind of like, why is he going through that? It's not just like, well, Julian was depressed, but it was kind of speaking to that experience from in almost like a metaphor kind of way of like, of that kind of experience of depression. That experience is being, I was kind of, that was informing the story as I was processing a recent kind of experience I had myself. So.
All right. Do we have any final questions or thoughts? I think we're going to have to wrap it up. We're going to have to start lunches soon.
Yeah. I hope I answered all your questions.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, you did have one on here about my favorite horror authors. I wanted to.
Oh yeah, who are your favorite horror authors?
I mean, obviously, I do love Stephen King. I already mentioned Thomas Ligotti and Robert Aickman. I really recommend, if you want. I'm not going to promise that you'll like Robert Aickman, but if that idea of kind of reading a story that you're kind of like left a little like about, but also with this undeniable sense of unease, like how a writer does that. Read Robert Aickman to find that out. And Thomas Ligotti, again, he really kind of opened up different ways of thinking about horror. But as far as a little less, I mean, Shirley Jackson. I like a lot of what I've read by Shirley Jackson. I actually liked We Have Always Lived in the Castle better than I like The Haunting of Hill House. I think that one is underappreciated. And then one of my favorite contemporary horror writers that is kind of in like this literary side of horror and also a lot in this like weirder genre of horror. His name is Michael Wehunt. He has actually both his collections right here. He right now he has short stories collections out, Greener Pastures and The Unconsolables. This one's the newest one, but I highly recommend both of them. But like read them both. He has a novel coming out next year that is connected to one of the stories in his first collection. But I really love his books. I will not shut up about them. And he's like a really nice guy and everything. So he has some novellas too that might be kind of hard to find. They're like in this like small press limited edition kind of situation. So I would recommend them too, but they would be harder to get your hands on. But definitely these two books, Greener Pastures and The Unconsolables by Michael Wehunt. It sounds like I'm getting commission or something, but I just really love his stories, and I love how he goes to different places, both emotionally and he's like a weird writer, so that it's like not the typical kind of plots you're used to, and he's very good and deliberate about his language. I really like just like good writing, So
Yeah.
in a lot of way, bad writing gets in the way of a good story for me, and which is, I mean, it kind of sucks to be picky, man. I hate being picky, but it's how I am. So I like his stuff.
All right.
Well, since we've shown some book covers, I want to go ahead and put this one up so you can see.
No, we can't see it.
Yeah,
You can't see it?
Oh,
yeah.
No, but
Oh, yeah, okay.
she's
You see the
real.
video. Sorry.
She's
My
recording on
bad.
her phone.
Right.
I tried.
No, that's good.
Unknowing, I sent.
I'll just cut that part out.
You mean hold it up again so we can
Yeah,
like
hold it up
so
again.
there you go. It's
Beautiful.
a cool cover.
It is.
Wow, such a cool cover. No, actually, I've seen there's a few different covers for this one.
Yeah,
I've seen, I think, at least two or three.
Another story. It's not a real long story, I guess. Basically, the short version of it is that I did remember. I talked about how I had a publisher in mind for this. I was really excited about it, and then that fell through. Well, I sent it out to some other small horror presses, and it did get picked up. And then I had I'm not always sure like how much detail is good to get into, but basically I had a disagreement with this publisher, and it wasn't, things weren't happening that I thought should be happening and that should have been happening according to my contract. So I got my rights back and then self-published it from there.
Okay.
Wow.
But I prefer the cover that I commissioned after self-publishing it. That was not one of the contractual problems, but it was definitely, I wasn't ever too happy about the initial cover anyways, but that's not what was the thing that actually got me to get my rights back. But I'm super, I love Ben Baldwin's the name of the artist that did this cover, and he also did the covers on my other two self-published novels, sorry. And I really love his work, and I was really happy to be able to work with him again on this.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one more time, thank you so much for being on. This was a really fun episode.
Mhm.
We had fun reading the book and obviously discussing it too. We hope you have a great day. And all right, so the next couple of episodes we're going to have next are a new deep dive from me, How the Grump Saved Christmas by Claire Kingsley. And then we're going to do a Christmas episode where we each will highlight a different Christmas culture. Then we're going to have a New Year's Eve book wrap up, plus a look at some books we were excited to read in 2025. And then we're going to do parts 1 and 2 of our group deep dive. We don't know what we're doing yet, but it's not going to be Leaves of Wind or whatever.
House of Leaves.
Whatever. Leaves of Wind. You know, it's fine. It's not going to be that either, apparently. Okay, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's time for us to sign off, but before we go, only the best libraries have librarians who don't shush you.
Or slurp you.